The Westminster government has finally published its transgender guidance for schools. So I'm delighted to have with me today to discuss it Lizzie Harewood, who is the Chief Executive of the Association of Christian Teachers, and John Denning, who is the Head of Education here at the Christian Institute. Lizzie, if I could turn to you first of all, just how long have we been waiting for this guidance?
That's a great question, Simon. I can't give you the exact timescale. I know that there were murmurings and discussions about this as far back as 2017, 2016 even, with the issue starting to take root and gain momentum. There was some guidance that was promised to be delivered, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in August 22, so last year. And that obviously didn't materialise until December. And I have to say, I wasn't entirely expecting it to be published this December either. I had an inkling that there could be a delay even until the new year. So although I'm pleased to see it has been published, it really has been a long time coming.
Because this has been a problem for schools for a long time, hasn't it?
It has indeed. And I'm sure that those of us who are educators or teachers, professionals in the sector, or those that are support staff, have seen a gradual increase in the numbers of children that are saying that they are transgender or identifying as a different gender or non-binary. And it's really taken on momentum in the last few years, and we've seen quite an explosion of children, particularly girls, who are now saying that they identify as male.
So, John, what exactly does the guidance say?
Perhaps the first thing to say is the name of the guidance. So the guidance is called Gender Questioning Children, Non-Statutory Guidance for Schools and Colleges in England.
That's an important distinction, isn't it? Gender questioning children.
That's right. So this guidance is not saying we have this special category of children called transgender children, and here are the things that schools are required to do for these children. It's saying we have this phenomenon in society. Now, how are schools going to deal with this? Children are going to be coming to schools requesting this, that and the other. What process do schools go through to make sensible decisions in this area?
And so what sort of help is the guidance going to give, first of all, to teachers?
It's helpful, I think, that in the first place, it's correcting some widespread myths. So there's a widespread myth in schools that they have some kind of legal duty to affirm children as the gender they say they are. And it's very clear that there is no such general duty on schools to affirm children in the gender that they think they are. Rather, what schools need to do is listen to what children are saying, not rush into any action, wait and see if this is something that's persistent, and then consider what's really in the best interests of that child. And it's very clear what's in the best interests of the child is not necessarily the same as what the child wants. And it says some helpful things about informing parents, making sure parents know what's happening, and giving great weight to what parents think. So, I mean, we've supported a number of parents who've been in a situation where the school has supported a child to transition behind their backs, in one case even referring them on to another organisation to provide them with affirmative counselling that the parent had no knowledge of. So if schools follow this guidance, it should put a stop to that.
So Lizzie, this is quite a change, isn't it? I mean, there's been a lot of pressure on teachers, hasn't there, to go along with transgender ideology?
Absolutely. And just going back to the issue of the delay, I think that's really contributed to an erosion of trust between school and home, professional impact on teachers, and particularly, from my perspective, Christian teachers, and of course, adding to the potential distress of students. So I think this is good news for school leaders, for teachers who have been up to this point left with absolutely nothing authoritative to refer to when they're making decisions about incredibly sensitive issues, either on a case-by-case basis or on perhaps guidance or advice that may be filled with misinformation or ideological material. So I feel that this is certainly good news to an extent.
So John, so just to reiterate then, the guidance says that schools should basically be using the child's real pronouns, their biological sex, because of course children can't change legal sex. And
it says that for primary schools.
For primary schools.
So, yes, so it says it expresses a great deal of caution about an agreement to change the pronouns that are used. And it says when for primary age pupils, all children in primary schools, primary age pupils in all through schools, then the school should not be using pronouns other than the ones that properly apply to the child according to their biological sex.
And that's what the school does. I mean, clearly pupils may choose to call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, but it's what the school does that we're talking about here.
Yes, so this is the official policy and the approach of the school. Obviously, the school cannot completely control what other children are going to do, but as far as the school's position is concerned, as far as the school's instruction to its staff is concerned, it doesn't explicitly say that, but I think that's what it's meaning. It's saying that for primary age pupils, they should not be using these preferred pronouns. When it comes to secondary pupils, there's a slightly more nuanced approach. So the guidance sets out really a decision-making process for schools to follow, the things they should take into account, including, as I've said, consulting parents, seeing what parents' views are and giving them great weight. And it presents an agreement to change what pronouns are used as really a last resort. If the school really thinks this is the only thing it can do, then yes, but it's an exceptional circumstance in which it should do that. And even then, there must be no compulsion of pupils or staff to use those pronouns.
So Lizzie, this emphasis on giving great weight to the views of parents about whether their own children should be given alternative pronouns or whatever in school. I mean, some of the transgender activists are going to react very badly to that, aren't they? Because they don't want parents to have a say in this. Isn't that right?
I would say they don't want their parents to have a say in this if they don't affirm their child's chosen gender. So and some are warning that that this could leave children vulnerable, that parents will actually not have their child's best interests at heart and will actually be a safeguarding concern. I mean,
so the parents, they say, are the safeguarding concern, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that actually this is what maybe the socially conservative minded amongst us would just call common sense. Parents should be consulted if their child wants to make decisions about the course of their life, that may have far-reaching impacts on themselves and even others around them. So it only makes sense, therefore, seeing as we don't know the impact that socially transitioning can have on a young person, and that it is not a neutral act, that parents should be consulted. Not affirming a child in their chosen gender is not an act of abuse. I think we need to be very clear there that if there are concerns about abuse, they need to be taken very seriously and referred to social services. But yet, because ideologically or because you don't believe that would be in your child's best interest, we mustn't perceive that to be automatically abusive. And I worry that actually the ideology is overshadowing a lot of the kind of the legitimate safeguarding concerns that could have been raised about this issue.
So, John, the real safeguarding concern is about protecting children from being carried away by transgender ideology, and but there's also been real safeguarding concerns, hasn't there, about single-sex spaces in schools?
Yes, that's right. I know one teacher who had to repeatedly raise safeguarding concerns about a teenage boy who was getting changed in a girls' PE changing room. and was exhibiting some quite concerning behaviours while he was in there, and yet the school felt they couldn't challenge this, and yet that's clearly a safeguarding situation, but it took real persistence by that teacher to get the school to recognise this as a real safeguarding issue and put an end to that practice. It took months while that situation was allowed to continue. So yes, that's a real safeguarding concern. Obviously, there is a reason why we have girls' changing rooms and boys' changing rooms, girls' toilets, boys' toilets, or where relevant, girls' dormitories and boys' dormitories, girls' showers, boys' showers, and that is for safeguarding reasons. And if schools don't stick to that automatically raises a safeguarding concern. So the guidance again is helpful on that. It makes very clear that although, yes, there may be some circumstances where a school may comply with some of the requests of a pupil, it must never allow a child to access the same-sex spaces that apply to the opposite sex. It must treat the child, mustn't allow that to happen. It might provide alternative provision for that child, that if that makes them feel more comfortable, if that can be done, but it mustn't allow them access to the facilities of the opposite sex.
So we said a bit about how this is going to help teachers who up to now have been under enormous pressure to go along with transgender ideology in some schools. How is this going to help parents? What use will parents be able to make of this new guidance?
I think the reality is that parents are going to have to make a lot of use of it, because we've already had activist teachers coming on the media, even actually on the day it was published and before it came out and before anyone had seen what it actually said, saying, well, it's not statutory, we're just going to ignore it. I'm not going to be complying with it. In fact, I think even a head teacher has gone on record to say that. Well, that's not acceptable. The guidance says, on behalf of the DfE, we expect schools to follow this, and the guidance exists to explain to schools what the law requires. But the reality is that there will be schools that seek to ignore it. Not every school, I'm sure, but there will be schools that just want to ignore this. And so it may well be in many situations that parents need to draw schools' attention to what this guidance says in order to get them to comply with it. I should make clear, it's draft guidance at this stage. It's a consultation process running up until March. And so it's also very, very helpful for parents and teachers, school governors and anybody. It's public consultation to respond to that consultation and to respond positively to the good things that are in this draft guidance, because they could be watered down in the final version. And so we really need people speaking out and saying and welcoming it, talking about how important these provisions are and that they aren't watered down in the final version.
I don't think that this will be an end to the matter. In fact, as you were saying, I think that schools, teachers, teaching unions even will probably be reluctant to acknowledge the guidance, and will perhaps even instruct members or their staff not to follow it. I think the government need to be really determined to hold schools to account. And I'd like to know what that will look like in the future. I also wonder what difference it will make to the active cases that are currently against teachers and parents who perhaps have been disciplined for either misgendering or expressing gender critical views or biblical views. I'd love to know how the government will respond to those individuals. So yes, in general, I'm very pleased. ACT are pleased. We think, as John said at the very beginning, that this is a sensible approach. I'm sure that there is still some way to go until it would be my ideal document. But in general, good news, a helpful start.
Well, Lizzie, thank you so much for joining us today. And John, thank you for joining me as well. If you want to know more about this or any of the other issues that the Christian Institute is working on, do check out our website. And if you are on the Christian Institute's mailing list, we will be contacting you with advice about how you can respond to the consultation on this guidance. But for now, thank you for joining us. Goodbye and God bless.
For more great content, like, subscribe and hit the notification bell.